Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 255 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Before I start, as ever, a big thank you goes out to our Patreon supporters and those of you that have purchased from our merch shop. Both are vital to this podcast, and we would not be able to produce or grow without you. If you'd like to support in some small way, information will be given at the end of this episode. That out of the way, let me tell you this is the second of two episodes with the artists that are showing at the Sarah Kravitz Gallery in Soho Square, which was created by 99 Projects over in Kensal Rise and is aptly named The Weight of Colour. So if you missed last week's episode, which featured Rosa Roberts, please do have a listen, as Rosa does give a little more context to how this exhibition came about. Today was the first time I'd ever spoke to Luke, but like so many of these conversations, I felt like an old mate after about 5 minutes. And Luke's passion for painting and teaching and learning comes across in spades in this episode. So please come and find that out for yourself as I introduce you to Luke Hannam. How are you, buddy? You good?
I'm good. Nice to meet you.
And you, mate, and you.
Kind of wrapping the paintings for the show. I've got the driver coming tomorrow, and like another one of these logistic things, it's getting everything wrapped up, leaning against the wall and ready to go into the van. It's like, you know, if there's any wasting of anyone's time, it's always a bit of a problem. So
is everything ready for the show?
Yeah, everything's ready. Everything's ready. It was ready about, I think I stopped working about two and a half weeks ago, and I because I had a lot of framing things to do.
Yeah.
And, no, I'm ready. It's ready. I've got another show, you see, going on in New York, which I'm going to on Saturday. So there's another show which I'm also preparing to open. So there's two shows happening at the same time, which I've not done before, and that is also, I don't know, it's just exhausting trying to.
That's the hard bit. It makes it as if it's the painting that's easy.
Well, God, yeah, that's why I want to go back. It's like hot afternoons in the science lab back at school. All I want to do is stare out the window. It's like the painting is like staring out of a window to me. It's not that it's easy, but my brain wants to do it. You know, my brain doesn't get sort of dyslexic problems in painting. It just
I'm with you on that
difficult.
One.
It's relaxing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, getting it.
Have you shown over there before, Luke?
Yeah, bits and pieces, little group shows and things like that. But this isn't a massive show. But the curator, a guy called Ryan Ward, he really celebrates outsider painting, and also he does contemporary painting too. But he has a real interest in kind of graffiti, outsider art. There's a kind of thing in my work where that outsider thing is quite kind of in my work. Like, I do a lot of stuff that's quite graffiti-like, as well as it's like sort of Matisse painting, one part of it, and then another part of it just goes completely kind of like something you might see sprayed on a wall. It's like it's a mixture of things.
Yeah.
And Ryan is one of the first people to really kind of embrace it, rather than trying to kind of curate it apart or trying to shut down one part of me. I don't like being shut down. So it's hard to find people who embrace what some people might call, I don't know, dysfunction. It's just the way I am. And that's something I'm kind of also expressing, if you like.
Well, you need that freedom, don't you? You know,
freedom. I understand that things need to make sense, but I think making sense is a bit of a tyranny sometimes, because I don't think as people we spend a lot of our time making sense. I think being human, it's a lot about sort of grasping in the dark, if you like. I think we want to make sense, but a lot of our experience is not like that. It's confusing, and
sometimes we make it makes sense to us, but sometimes it doesn't always cross over to the viewer.
I think what I'm saying is being confused isn't in itself a bad thing.
No.
It's part of life. And I think if you're an artist, if you remember back to like being at school where people were trying to make you sensible in a way, they were trying to make you make sense and employable. I always had a problem with it. So as I've gone through life, I've realized that my natural state is to be quite non-linear in a way. Like just, and I think they tried to stop me being like that.
Yeah, your boundaries are quite fluid.
I'm just open to stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I like exploring, I like experimenting with different ideas, and I think just like if you think of painting as like conversation, I don't like having the same conversations over and over and over again. I like to be surprised. I like someone to say something to me that I've never heard before. I function well in that environment.
Yeah.
You know, whereas when things become routine or safe, you know, my concentration begins to go in a funny way.
You mentioned Matisse earlier. That's the first signal I got when I was looking at your work.
Yeah.
In both your painting and your drawing.
Yeah. I think that comes from, well, first of all, just he was a painter I was introduced to when I was at college, and it made complete sense to me. I'd been sort of brought up in a very sort of musical home, and I play music. I'm a professional musician. My dad was a jazz musician, and he played all through my life growing up. And Matisse to me is like kind of the visual sort of version of improvisation.
Yeah.
And when I first had a teacher talking to me about painting when I was at art school, I noticed that they used language that was very similar to my dad. It was a sort of jazz language. And then I realized that Matisse was really interested in some of those ideas. And it just kind of, that was the entry point. And I've always been interested in looking and drawing from life, but seeing how far I can kind of improvise that, or how, you know, once I've understood it, what can I do with it, if you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's as old as the hills. That's what all painters are doing. But that fascinated me when I was a student, and it still fascinates me that if I draw and draw and draw, eventually I'll sort of unlock its secret, and then anything could happen. But once you've kind of unlocked it, you know what I mean? And that takes a lot of looking and repetitious drawing, and I think that's where that started. And I think also European painting is mainly kind of part of a sort of romantic tradition. You know, it's very much about what people feel rather than kind of complex things about society. It's much more about the individual feeling something. And I think I'm very drawn to that. You know, I don't tend to talk in art speak. You know, I'm not interested in really highbrow intellectual ideas. I'm interested in human feeling, which always kind of puts us in a position of either laughing, crying, smiling, falling in love. You know, it's those simple things that Shakespeare would recognize, if you like. They're the simple components of storytelling.
Do you reckon that's where being, and I'm presuming that you place yourself as an outsider artist, seeing as you mentioned it earlier?
I'm not really an outsider artist. It's just that I really love people who look outside of art. I think a professional artist should be in conversation with art. They should be looking at paintings, you know, learning about painting, but they should also trust their instinct as a person to be, you know, there's no good making films, for instance, about films. There's no point making paintings just about painting. You've got to be looking beyond that.
Yeah.
And you've got to trust your human experience. And then you kind of look to your books, and, you know, you go to exhibitions for ideas and support, but you've got to be able to trust your direct experience.
Yeah.
That's what I call the outsider. The outsider is the person who lives their life, you know, as if they're not an artist, and then they make work. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm a trustee for a charity called the Cursler Arts.
Right.
And it's a prison arts charity.
Yeah.
And each year they have a couple of thousand submissions to put on. They put on an exhibition in the Royal Festival Hall each year. And this year, Jeremy Deller is the curator for it.
Right.
But when we go and see the artwork that's been entered, just that freedom of the art world. It's as if it's coming from the heart straight to the hand, you know, when they're creating.
Yeah, well, I'll
And
say that probably.
it's although they're confined, that's what I'm trying to say. Although they are confined, the
Yeah,
freedom that they've got, I'm quite envious of, you know.
sounds like a sort of a contradiction that someone could be free whilst also being a prisoner. That's one of the great things about creativity, is that you can't actually lock it up. It's not possible. And I think the freedom, once you've kind of understood a bit about it, isn't exactly what you think it is either. It's like being able to do anything isn't freedom. I think you then come across this thing which a lot of sports people talk about, which is discipline, but not the discipline imposed by someone else or something else, but the self-discipline. I think freedom requires self-discipline for it to become what you wanted it to be, which is a way out or towards something. And I think if you don't develop the structures, the kind of processes with your creativity, it can actually work against you. You know, it can cause mental health issues. It can, you know, you're opening up a Pandora's box. What it needs is a focus. It's the same with young kids who learn football. It's really good to go and learn football if you've got a lot of energy, but to go and learn something, because energy and creativity needs structure. And I always worry about the people in the world who discover creativity but don't have access to any structure.
Yeah.
I think that can be dangerous, and it can lead you into all sorts of very self-destructive things. Throughout history, a lot of creative people have self-harmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because it isn't in itself freedom. It's only freedom if lots of other things join up.
Yeah.
And it really is. Yeah.
When I go into prisons, I tell the guys there when I'm doing my talks and workshops, I say to them there, just try to create, you know, get your mind working, and you know, and it doesn't matter what it is, it's writing, scribbling, even doodling, just having a pen in your hand and just seeing what comes out at the end.
Absolutely. But I think that once you've done that a few times, what's really nice is if someone's on hand to help you develop it.
Yeah.
I actually think, you know, creativity is allowed out, but not helped, that it can also cause other problems. It's like letting the thing free. There's a responsibility then to kind of helping that person to understand how to make it grow.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people who find themselves on the edges of society and people who are kind of rejected by society, it's natural to move towards creativity, but I'm very aware of how destructive it can be as well. You know, a lot of gang culture is based in creative thinking. It's wanting to exchange ideas. It's wanting to make things happen, but that doesn't automatically make it good. It's like it needs an outcome. I had a pretty safe upbringing in many ways, but terrible life at school, and I've always been up and down sort of emotionally, and it's only by getting into a pattern, getting focused, sort of what you might call being professional, but sticking to it, you know, really persevering, even when it's tough, you know, it flowers into something really good.
Where was it you grew up, Luke?
I grew up in Derbyshire.
Got you.
In the Peak District. I went to a really small rural comprehensive school, and it was a hard experience for me. I found it really difficult. And then I went to Chesterfield near Sheffield, did a foundation course, and it really was the most incredible experience, like meeting tutors who, you know, they just set light to something. I mean, I actually think I heard for the first time someone said, "You're good at that." And I went, "What? Am I?"
Isn't that a thing? Isn't that a great thing to hear?
You remember it forever.
Yeah.
And you want to pass that on as well, because until you hear that, I think it's true that everyone needs a thing. Everyone needs something, you know, they need to feel that they've got a gift at something.
I associate, when I got that in art, the first time I got it, it was in a prison art class, and the tutor just asked me to draw an eye. And by this time, I'd already sort of half got hooked on art. He asked me to copy this eye from a portrait of an actor called Stephen Burkoff.
Okay.
And the tutor, I must add, I don't think I've mentioned this before, the tutor had already done like the oval of the face and the cross, as it were, you know. and showing me where to put the eye. And it looked like the eye that I was copying. And inside, I felt really good. And
Yeah.
that was the project, was just draw a section of the face. And that was on a Friday. Over the weekend, I spent hours and on this portrait. And I went into the art tutor, Dougie was his name, and I walked into the class on Monday holding, let me just get this bit of paper here, holding this portrait like this against my chest. And then I went, Dougie, and he's looked around and I went, ta-da. And there was this portrait of Stephen Burkoff that looked like him. And Luke, the look on his face is like a proud dad. You know, I never had a dad growing up, but that's just the look on his face then. And he just went, Gary, that's amazing. And it got me then. And truth be told, Luke, I've gone goosey and I'm welling up a bit now,
Oh, it's
even, you
wonderful,
know.
though. It's what a fantastic story. I mean,
And
like,
it was that I went, fuck it. It gave me some sort of validation as a
yeah.
person and the artist that in my head I thought I'd love to be, but there's no way a lad from my council estate could do that. That then give me some sort of something inside to say that it could be possible, you know.
Well, it's a fantastic story. I mean, I teach as well, and I mean, not in the same context. You know, I just have private students, but it's wonderful when someone goes through that kind of eureka moment. You know, they suddenly realize they can do something. But for me, the thing that makes me well up, I suppose, is that I remember as if it was yesterday how I felt, and I think I have a sort of like a vocation or a calling, if you like, to want to share that thing, you know, to see that happen because it turns your life around.
Yeah.
And you don't really understand anything until you understand something that you've done, and also opens up communication with other people. You know, I was quite resistant to communication when I was a kid, you know, but once I realized that it was a kind of okay space to talk about things like the things I was doing they thought were good, I started talking more and I started to interact much more with people around me. You know, I enjoyed talking about it. And now I really, really enjoy talking about painting or creativity. But I remember not knowing what to talk about because I wasn't good at the subjects that they were doing. But I think talking, that's another thing that comes from validation. You start to open up as a person, I think.
Yeah, and it's that understanding that you have and the confidence that you
But
have.
it's all part of it, isn't it? All these things are connected to communication. Once you realize that you're saying something and someone else is understanding it and liking what you're saying, it just leads to this thing. I mean, I think just like what we're doing now, I think communication is really what it's about.
Yeah.
And I think picture making, I mean, picture making is the origin of language, the origin of words. I mean, letters used to be pictures, and they are still in some
Yeah.
countries. So drawing pictures of things is the most powerful way of communicating. But and communication is a way of knowing that someone else recognizes that you're sitting there. You know, it's like
Definitely.
it's all connected, and pictures lead to conversations. And the wonderful thing about painting is, you know, you can just rip it out, throw it away. You can just keep doing more. You know, you just it's a brilliant, you know, just do
Yeah.
it more and more and more and more. I mean, it is a bit expensive sometimes, but
How did you start off? Like, was you always drawing as a
I
kid?
was always drawing as a kid. But I think I was drawing. Yeah, I was kind of hiding through drawing, I think, as a kid. But I've always found, I think the common phrase now is self-soothing, you know, a way of sort of reducing anxiety.
Yeah.
And I think I always remember as a child, you know, people giving me pencils and seeing that I love drawing. But no one ever, no, I didn't do art at school, and I didn't get any qualifications at school. I didn't even get any qualifications in music. And yet I went on to be a professional musician, and I'm a professional painter. But I didn't do a CSE or a O level in it. I got into art school through sign writing, and I didn't have to do an interview. They just said, "Oh, you want to?" Oh no, I left school, went to bricklaying for a week, Derby Tech. That was awful. A lot of my friends joined the army, and they said, "Oh, go to Chesterfield, and they're recruiting a course for a sign writer." They let me in. They didn't even see if I could draw. From that, I went and did a graphic design course. They didn't even see if I could draw either. And then eventually, through a friend, I found myself to a life class. I was invited to a life class, and that was it. Boom. You know,
Excellent.
that was where a drawing tutor said, I mean, he actually said something crazy that completely over the top, but it did wonders for my confidence. He said, "You draw like Michelangelo." I mean, I didn't. I think what he was saying was there was something about.
Maybe he meant the turtle.
I don't know what he meant, but I remember thinking that sounds. I remember going home and telling my parents. I mean, that was a very big moment, and yeah. I mean, funny enough, people still tell me that now because I am actually really interested in Renaissance drawing, and I just love really fine, detailed drawing. I just find it really interesting, and then I use that to springboard into really loose kind of painting.
How do you do that? I find that really interesting because I'm quite the opposite. I was saying this to Rosa just earlier. I love looking at work like Matisse, Francis Bacon, where they're just free. You can see the action and the movement in the artwork. But when I come to do a drawing or a painting, as much as that's what I want to do, mine is very tight and closed in and accurate.
I think
What's the bridge?
from
That's
early
the question.
experiences in jazz. The way I understood jazz was you learnt the repertoire, you learn the tunes, you know, the jazz standards, because this is what my dad did all the time. So you'd learn a tune, you would go around singing the melody over and over and over again. And the melody to me is the tight drawing, if you see what I mean. It's anyone can sing, it's really accessible, it's like an earworm, it gets straight to your soul. So melody was really important, but then I watched the way my dad would improvise. So he'd take the melody and then begin to move it around. So it's very logical to me that it works from learning how something is, the tune, if you like, or the way it looks. And then once you've understood it, you're free. But the freedom comes through the understanding.
So it all heads back to a central structure.
It all comes back to a central structure. And when I get kind of lost, or if I go too far out, or I know there's always drawings that, you know, connect to my paintings, and they're a bit like ordnance survey maps. You know, like when I get completely lost, I rifle through the drawings, find the drawings again, and they help me find the way back to the path. So it's a dialogue between being lost and knowing where I'm going, and the drawings and the paintings are in a kind of like a GPS system.
Yeah.
But you know, I want to be free. I want to, you know, I like Jimi Hendrix as a kid. You know, I as a musician, I like really, you know, I was really into punk and post-punk, and I'm really into dance music as well. I'm really interested in things that people do that don't require massive amounts of expertise to experience them. Like I like watching people having a really great time, like dancing, or, you know, you don't need permission. You know that thing about punk, like someone only had to watch a band on the stage and the next week they were on stage.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that kind of accessible thing. I'm not a person who likes the doors to close in people's faces. So that's what it is. I think the hardest thing for me is that I want to be free and I want to express myself, but it's frustrating when I see that it doesn't connect with other people. There's also that attempt to see if you can achieve the third thing, which is connection and your freedom. It's a hard thing to get right, you know. You can go too
and you
far
can't
off.
control it either, can you?
Can't control it, and you can't make work to please people, but there is nothing better when you can get all those ducks in a row. One of the problems of art is the way that it's been treasured by elite people, and elite people don't like people accessing it.
No, or pushing the boundaries.
Make it complicated.
Yeah.
They make it all sorts of things that ruin it. And I think once again, that outsider instinct, it's a bit like a punk rock song in a sense. It's like sort of saying, stuff that. I'm going to connect directly to people.
Yeah.
And that's why, not all my paintings, and I do all sorts of things, but what I'm trying to do is make a punk rock song that hits someone straight in the heart.
Yeah.
You know, they're usually about falling in love. You know, like what's that greatest punk song ever? You know, the Buzzcocks, Ever Fallen in Love.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear that, that does not get boring to me.
No, I'm
Ever
with
fall
you
in
on
love
that.
with someone? Ever fall in love? Ever fall in love? I can still remember hearing that for the first time, like 2.5 minutes of absolute precision.
Yeah.
But it's punk. Anyone can play it. And the words aren't complicated, but he means it. And I suppose that's another thing. It's about being authentic. It's about meaning it, believing in it, and not getting caught up in all the kind of class war stuff that goes on in art, that, you know, posh openings and royal this and royal that. I don't know. There's something about it that doesn't quite sit with me. But I mean, I live in that world, and I show paintings in that world. It's just, I don't try to prop it up too much. Just try and keep it real, really.
Yeah.
Just be honest about stuff. And
Yeah, I remember several years ago when I went into, I think it might have been Soho Square, no, Hoxton Square, and I just saw a skip with an artwork in it. And at that point, I didn't know of the Skip Gallery. Do you know the Skip Gallery? I didn't know of them then. And I saw all these people standing around this skip. And because of what it was, I genuinely thought there was some sort of prank or a video going on where someone had put this big sculpture in a skip. And then I was like, this is how we should show an artwork. Just dump it in the street and let everyone enjoy it, or walk past it and ignore it if they want to.
I think that's good. I agree.
There's a question. I mean, I do have questions in this.
Podcasts have questions.
Yeah. I mean, you answered the first three in the first 5 minutes. So we just went there.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, there is the very first question was, how would you explain what you do to someone that didn't know your work? You've more than covered that. More than covered that. But which piece that you've created do you think has got the strongest emotional connection, be it to you or someone else?
Well, currently there's a small painting of some pears that I made that I can see makes people feel a lot of joy. And I painted it at the end of a day in the studio when I'd been working on what I wanted to believe were some big and important paintings. And at the end of the day, you know, I was packing up, and it was just a little thing that I did without a care in the world. I certainly didn't have any grand designs for this picture, you know, did it? And I love the way sometimes things that are done in those moments that aren't part of your big, grandiose vision, they seem to connect with people. And I think what happens there is that you let go of your self-consciousness sometimes, and you just make something with just joy, or just a very pure channel. And it surprises me and doesn't surprise me in the way that that connects. I think that says something really profound about creativity, is that the bigger and the more important you think it is, that doesn't equate to its impact on other human beings. And I don't know how you untangle that, but I think it means that when you are working on your big, important things, you have to make sure you are in a very authentic place and not getting caught up in that kind of ambition equals greatness thing, which I don't think it does. So that's one thing about the pears. People are always telling me how much they feel so happy looking at it. And sometimes I think, oh, is there nothing else? I think that's enough. I mean, human happiness, that's one hell of an achievement. You know, like, I've played a role in someone's happiness. When you think about how rare and complex happiness is, how elusive it is, to have played any part in that is great. I'm particularly like, there's a big painting in the show of a woman. I was painting a series of female figures just sitting on a chair. I had a model, and I was really interested in when she thought she didn't need to pose, when she thought when I wasn't working, just relax and put her leg up on the chair, and then she put her leg through the arm of the chair, and she was just kind of in the end I called one of the paintings slump. She was slumped in the chair having a cup of tea, and she was not thinking that the camera was on, if you like. And I did a drawing, and I became obsessed with the idea of somebody just relaxing without feeling that anyone was watching them. And it led to a whole series of paintings, just really, really simple motif of a woman sitting on a chair. And I did it over and over again over the last few months. And I ended up with one big red painting that just, it went through so many phases. And in its final moments, it was so brutally painted, not in any aggressive sense, just very direct, hardcore,
raw,
Buzzcocks chords, you know. I felt it. And have you ever fallen in love? The answer was yes, right now. And that's how I felt. And you wait after you make paintings like that for them to crumble, like you haven't been able to turn it into, it's not real. It falls apart, you know, like a shadows. But each day I came into the studio, it passed the test, you know. And in the end, I said to Francis, who's organised the show, I said, I'm putting that in. And they said, oh, great, it's fantastic. And I've just been wrapping it today and I still like it. So I love making things when I don't think I'm doing things important. I love when they connect. And I also love making really quite brash, brutal, expressive things and then them lasting.
Yeah.
Because I feel I've connected, like the foot with the ball or the goal, or something has happened, you know.
And I'm not really a very spiritual person, Luke, but I do believe
it's a very spiritual thing to say, you know.
Yeah, I know, and it's always followed by a but.
But because it means that you are actually. But go on, yeah.
But I do believe that love and passion, if that's put into an artwork, you feel it, you get it, and
I think the body is basically senses.
yeah,
The senses need dynamic experiences to wake up. And I think any waking up of the senses leads to the potential experience of what a religious person might call some sort of transcendence, but even just happiness or love, but feeling your senses. It's why we go on holiday, because what we want, food, wine, swimming, sunshine. We want our skin, our eyes, our mouths, our stomachs to feel something at the same time.
yeah.
And what happens during the day in normal life is one of your senses might be activated, but a holiday is 2 weeks of multi-sense stimulation. And then you have a moment of feeling, and then you have to come back.
Yeah.
But human beings want to feel like they're levitating, and they want to feel like their senses mean something. When you said you were welling up or you're feeling goosebumps, your nervous system is what meaning is.
Yeah. I mean, you said about experiencing all those things and then coming back.
Yeah.
I think the coming back is just as important
Well,
as the being there, because that is the grey canvas that all that colour
Well,
is
you can
popping off,
people,
isn't it?
tell other people about it. But no, you know that thing though, you know how far you've gone when you come back, because it can feel like a bit of a crash land. Like, oh my God, you know, back to worrying about the inland revenue or
Yeah.
Escapism, I think, is interesting, because what's really happening is that you are allowing your senses to guide you. And that's how you really experience life. And art is essentially the activation of the senses. Van Gogh is basically pushing the button of sensory overload. That's what paintings should do. They have a job, I think, to excite. They can be slow burners, but they still have a job to do. Like when you go to a big gallery in the world somewhere, like say watching people looking at the Mona Lisa, and everyone says, oh, they're all crowding around it just because it's famous painting and it's been stolen. Lots of cynical things that people say. But it's also another truth. Painting is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And you can't write it off like that. It's like there's something about that painting. And I love watching people crowd around paintings. I think it's great. I think it's brilliant. You know, glad that people take an interest. It's exciting. It's like being at a rock concert. It's like flipping it. Hope I can make one of them.
Yeah.
You know.
See, my wife isn't into art
No.
at all, really.
Fair
But
enough.
when she's seen me looking at a painting and getting excited, it might not be a visually exciting painting to look at. You know, the picture to her, if you like, isn't exciting. But the way it's been painted, and I'll go to her, oh, look at these markings here, and she's like, it's a picture. And I say, it's not a picture, it's a painting. And it's them two worlds, you know.
That's a really interesting thing. I mean, that's such a brilliant, beautiful thing you just said, really, because for me, that, say like the writer of a book is in love with language, but the reader of the book is in love with meaning. They can also be in love with words, but you shouldn't have to be in love with words to understand the story. But the story can't be conveyed unless someone is in love with the words. Like, someone has to be excited by the language. Like if you say, oh, do you like anything on Netflix? Have you seen a film you like? And they go, oh, I love this. And, you know, like maybe they have some entertainment show they're enjoying on a Saturday night. They go, oh, I really like that. They go, well, that's taken a lot of creative people to make that.
Yeah.
That is not as simple as you might think. That there is acting in that. There is cinematography in that. There is editing in that. There is direction in that. There's a script in that. It goes on and on and on. And when you see after a film, like it never ceases to amaze me how many names come up after
Yeah.
It's like sometimes it goes on for weeks. It's like, what? Imagine payroll, but it shows what it takes to communicate,
Well, funnily enough, I got asked just last week, sorry, 2 weeks ago, to audition for a part in a film, which is, I've never thought about that thing before, but they wanted an ex-criminal, someone, because it was a prison film, but they wanted someone who wasn't an actor, to play the part. And although I didn't get it, but I had to audition for it. And I've always thought, oh, I could do acting. It's just sort of words and like pretend and role play, which obviously it is.
Yeah.
But I did find out that it's not just playing and role play. It was really, really difficult to do something that I would probably do just on an everyday basis,
No, because the thing about acting, and it's very similar to good painting in a sense, that to be a great actor, you have to convince people that you're not acting.
Yeah.
To be a great painter, you have to be able to convince people that although you're expressing something, you're not just somebody full of techniques, you're actually someone conveying a meaning. And, when an actor looks like they're trying to let you know they're acting, they just seem like an amateur, which is why a lot of amateur painting, and that's not a judgment, it's just an observation, but a lot of amateur painting is often more technically proficient than so-called professional painting. Because when you take something to a professional level, just like in acting, you have to make your skill invisible. That it can no longer be about that.
It becomes too complex, doesn't it?
But it's just not interesting. No one wants to see you acting. They don't want that.
Yeah.
What they want to see you in a film, even if you're a famous actor. I mean, this is what's incredible. Let's say you're Tom Cruise, When Tom Cruise can make you forget that he's Tom Cruise and believe he's another person. And I think that comes down to the same thing in painting, is that you can't be thinking about art. You have to be thinking about something you feel. You have to confront with everything you've got that thing that you feel, however stupid you might think it is, or how embarrassing it might be, or if you feel people might laugh. Your job is to stare it right in the eyes and deliver it.
Yeah.
It's hard. And it's the same in acting. When the camera starts turning, you start becoming self-conscious, and self-consciousness is the opposite of acting. And thinking about the art world is the opposite of painting.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing this I only had to read a paragraph.
Yeah.
But I was constantly thinking, where should I put my arm to look natural? Where should I put my shoulder to be natural? Where should I look to be I forgot how to just fucking be. You know what I mean?
That thing when you were younger and you had to walk down the street and there was a gang of kids that were like cool kids, like
exactly that. Exactly that.
That forgetting how to walk, your legs turn to rubber and
Yeah.
actually start walking like Monty Python.
Yeah.
What's the matter with your fucking legs? And they
exactly
go,
that.
Well, it's because you're staring at me. Forgotten how to walk. So you forget the most natural things, I think. But I think that's it. That's it in a nutshell. All of this stuff is about not getting rubber legs in public. It's about knowing how to be yourself, which is not easy.
No.
You've got to know yourself first, and then you've got to dare to do it, even when you feel people might think you're an absolute whatever.
Well, we've spoke about all these influences.
Yeah.
And there is a question that I do ask every guest, Luke, and that is, if there was you and 5 other artists, past or present, what would your ideal group show be?
I think Matisse, Picasso, Helen Frankenthaler. Yes. Do I look at a lot? Wow, God, it gets harder then, because then you have to know you're going to leave someone out. Amy Sillman, S-I-L-L, man, Sillman. Definitely Amy.
Amy Sillman, is she American?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
She's incredible. She's sort of making animation now.
Yeah, yeah.
Really good. And also, she's just one of the most courageous artists. Like, she smashes paintings apart. She changes them every. I just love that. Fearlessness. There's another thing. I don't know. After that, There's so many people I could put in. Picasso, Matisse, Amy Silman, Helen Frankenthaler, who I adore. Joan Mitchell. I think I'll put Joan in. Joan Mitchell. But there's so many painters of that period, the sort of 50s, 60s. They threw paint about. You know, I love people who can move paint. So I love delicate, subtle, romantic, but I also love physical, visceral fearlessness. And
Yeah.
if I had this much, if I could buy all the paint in the world, I think I'd be painting like Jackson Pollock, making huge paintings, figurative paintings, but with loads of paint, like
Yeah.
really thick and sploshy. And you know, I always feel a bit contained by finance. You know, it's annoying. Like cheaper paint can be like 100 quid.
Yeah.
You could use it up in an hour. So, it's like being a drug addict, being a painter.
Were you saying that about the texture of the paint?
Yeah,
I remember there was a painting, a portrait of Matisse by Duran that got me. It was like later on in Duran's life, like I think it was like 1905 or something, and they was just painting each other. The painting of Matisse, it was just, you could see that it was just loaded on. Each brushstroke was just really heavy, but it had a sort of quite a delicate look to it, you know.
Listen to the way you talk, Gary. You talk. I can see why you were into audition, because you do have a great voice, and you talk really. It got a nice rhythm to the way you talk.
Oh,
But
thank you.
you record. Well, I'm sure you do listen to yourself. You emphasize your words a lot. You know, you put a lot of emphasis in your phrases. You really commit to the words you're using, which I think is possibly why you're doing this, because you're good with language and you say what you mean. It's really nice to be asked a question by you because it's so punchy, you know. Good on radio, that kind of thing. But the equivalent in painting is the paint.
Yeah.
You know, what you're describing to me is the way you talk. It's loading it up. Well, load up your thinking, give it a quick sensor, just check it's not completely nuts.
Oh, there's not much of that. In between brain and mouth, there's not much going on, I'm afraid.
No thinking whatsoever. and then deliver it. As long as it's got kindness in it and it's a useful comment, can't do any harm, but deliver it with real passion. It ignites a response. And that's what it's like to be spoken to by you. It ignites a response. No, but what I'm really talking about is how it's the same in painting. It's like you load up the brush, that's the word. You hit the canvas with it, that's the phrase. And why would you want to use 20 words when it's the buzzcocks all over again?
Yeah.
Why not just say it? You know, and that's the way you talk, and that's the way I try to paint. And that's the thing that keeps me painting is, can I say that again? I'm going to paint the same girl again. I'm going to do the same painting again, but I'm going to see if I can be even more direct. I'm going to see if I can do it, you know, 3 moves and out, 3 things, bang, bang. Yeah. And then I go home feeling, yes. And I come back the next day and go, oh, it's rubbish. If I come back and it's holding together.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is speak clearly, be honest, show passion, and communicate.
Well, speaking of the visual language, if you like, the show that you've got with Rosa Roberts, The Weight of Colour.
Yeah. Weight of Colour is something Amy spoke about. That's an Amy Silman comment.
Oh, got you. Because when I spoke to Rosa, what a beautiful title for that adds up to both your techniques.
Well, yeah, we're both really interested in, and as all painters are, but we are both particularly fascinated by using colour in a very bold and vibrant way. And I think of that as the weight, you know, the emphasis.
Yeah. Both your works sit so graciously together.
That's Rosa's.
It's as if you were both a collaborative force and always have been. It's just that you decide to use the same technique to do figurative work, and she possibly, does more sort of floral and still life, if that can be crudely put
know.
like
I
that?
think when she called me and asked me if I wanted to do it, and we'd never spoken before, and she said lots of lovely things down the phone about how much she'd really like me to do it, and I was familiar with her work and loved it, and I was really excited, and she, I'm sure she'll remember when she asked, I just went yes, because I saw it immediately, and I think we're both just very direct responders to feeling, and yeah, it really does work. It's a very unpretentious, really visceral kind of, yeah, it's made of the right stuff as far as I'm concerned. And it's only on for a week, which is sad, but sometimes things that don't run for very long create more of an intense experience, and maybe more people will go knowing they've only got 5 days to see it in. But and it's a great space. That I haven't actually been to the gallery, but I've seen a walk round film of it, and it's a really great space. And
It's an amazing. I've been there a couple of times.
you know,
What a
beauty,
space!
because it can handle big paintings,
Yeah,
and there's going to be quite a few larger paintings, and obviously a lot of range of smaller things. But there's space for it to breathe in there, and I think with a lot of color going on, a gallery needs to be able to handle that. It can be
yeah.
quite, a lot. But I think it's just going to be punchy, positive, joyous stuff.
I mean, when she told me how your inclusion come to fruition, she said that she just knew of your work, phoned you up, asked you if you would be in this show. And then I said, oh, who wouldn't want that phone call a couple of times a year, you know?
I mean,
I
I
said,
did.
how cool was that for Luke?
I know it's cool. I've got there's quite a lot of things been going on of late. Like I am doing more shows, and I've had quite a few shows in the last couple of years. So it wasn't really the absence of shows. It wasn't that I would have said yes to anything. It wasn't like I was desperate to show. In fact, I just finishing another show that had been quite a big headache to get organized. In some ways, I could have done with a break. Um, uh, it was more the feeling of this that I said yes to. It was, I don't know, it just felt so direct. That's what made me want to do it. I mean, in some ways, I needed a break, but there are certain things that come along you just know that you got to do, and this was one of them.
Good.
Hopefully, we'll do more together. I think it'd be. I certainly would like to. I can't speak for her, but hopefully she will.
How large are the pieces that you're putting in?
180 by 210 centimeters. 280 by
Wow.
210. Some of them are quite large, and then they go down to just small little things like that. And they're 120 by 90, which is a standard kind of gallery size.
Yeah.
I think 3 larger ones, 3 medium-sized ones, and then quite a lot of smaller things. But they might not all. You never know what will actually make the wall.
Yeah.
It's what looks right.
But it's great that you've both got them large pieces.
Yeah, I think that was something else that she knew about me, that I work quite large, and she wanted some bigger paintings.
I know the room is.
I,
I know the show's called The Weight of Colour,
yeah,
but the weight of the room would be good as well, wouldn't it? Because if it was only her that done the larger work, she would have to have one of hers on the opposite wall to
there's a real complementary kind of
counterbalance.
birth quality to our work, in a sense. We are different, obviously, with different emphases. I think I'm much more orientated towards the portrait and the figure, and I think she's more orientated towards the still life. But I think we both are in love with a very particular era of painting, early 20th century modernism,
Yeah.
when painting was having a real moment of experimentation and opening out. I think we both embraced that, and I think with the formats and the sizes and the way that we use paint, there's a lot of compatibility in the painterliness of them. You can see they're different people, but you can also see that they might be sharing a studio together.
Exactly that.
It's a philosophical connection somewhere, and she's a fantastic painter, and keep it simple. That's all you need, and you want things to talk to each other. You want paintings that sort of chatter in the room.
Yeah, there'll definitely be a visual conversation going on there, won't there, between the two?
That sounds lofty, but it's important that each painting makes you not just want to go to the next painting sitting next to it. What you really want in a gallery is to move from side to. You want as you move around, you want, oh, I've got to go and look at that. That's when it's in conversation, because you move around the room. If you just go along in a kind of chronological sequence, that's like a museum or something.
Yeah, yeah.
What I really like is where people dance the room, and you think that's great. That's what you want. From each painter, there's a kind of conversation, as you put it.
And then, so this should be coming out on the 8th, which will be just at the start of the exhibition. So, just give us a rundown of the dates, or the information on the show.
It's the 9th to the 14th of July, so it's 1 week. It's at the Sarah Kravitz Gallery, which is in the far corner, the Oxford Street side of Soho Square. Go. I think it's going to be a great show, and I fully believe in it, and I know Rosa does. So there's not many things in the world that you can believe in. I think this is one of them. For a week, go and have a look. And,
but isn't it nice, Luke, to have something that gets your blood boiling a little bit in a good sense?
Summer in a way, and summer isn't just a time of frivolity, and this is the thing I was meaning about the senses. The summer is the time where your senses ignite.
Yeah.
And I think this show is a summer show, not because it's in holiday mode, but because it's in sensory mode.
Definitely.
The sun's out. This show feels like the sun's out to me. If that isn't too much of a naff thing to say, I'm going to say it. It has to be a summer show, this.
Yeah, most definitely. And if anyone can't make the show, where can they see what you're doing, be it website or social media?
Social media is the best place. I'm a terrible oversharer, so you won't visit me for long, because you'll quickly want to take it off. So who is this guy? But Luke Hannam Paintings is my Instagram, and I regularly post. I'm very active on there. I write about painting as well. I write things, and I'm quite opinionated about stuff. So
good.
Yeah, and I've got a company called The Practice Room, which is spelled Practise, not CE.
Okay.
It's not art practice, and that's very much about teaching drawing and painting. And there's a website to launch, but there's also an Instagram for The Practice Room. That can be interesting as well. If anyone wants to, interact with me in terms of tutorials or stuff like that. I am a professional teacher. I've taught for years, and I take that side of it very seriously. Going back to the thing that you were talking about, the prison thing, I had very positive experiences through painting that completely changed my life, and I very, very committed, as everyone should be, in putting back what you use. Putting some back. That's what it's really about, I think.
Well, Luke, thank you very much for your time, mate. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I've really enjoyed talking to you. Really good questions and a really lovely vibe about you. And it's nice to have a conversation like that. So thank you. Take care. Have a lovely afternoon.
Take care. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. It's a podcast that's produced with the help of the listener. And if you like what you've heard and you think you might be able to give a little support, there's 2 ways in which you can do it. If you go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile, you'll find a Linktree drop-down box. And in that box, you'll find 2 links. One is called Buy Us a Coffee, and it's pretty much that. You can make a one-off payment, the price of a cup of coffee. Or, if you're able and want to do it more long-term, you can become a Ministry of Arts Patreon, where you can sign up to support us on a monthly basis. And 100% of your support goes back into the podcast. And if you're not able to do that, that's absolutely fine. This content is free for everyone. But we would urge you to follow us on your socials and show us a bit of love that way. Either way, thanks for listening, and see you next time. Ta-da.